I'm an old lady, but I have a beautiful, sexy figure, open stripes, big hips, and beautiful lips. Here is my story. I'll never forget that day. Unlike the quiet and routine days I'd grown used to, everything changed in an instant. That morning, I woke up as usual, made myself a cup of coffee, and stood by the window watching the world outside. I was 59. But there was a part of me that always felt young. I refused to accept the reality of aging. I'd taken care of myself, worked out regularly, and every time I looked in the mirror, I tried to see someone who was still vibrant and attractive, but that emptiness inside me, nothing could fill it. Anthony, the delivery boy's name was Anthony. Every time I saw him, I felt something strange, a warmth but also an inexplicable pull. He was 23. Maybe it was his youthful energy that drew me to him. For the past few months, I had been ordering things, online nonstop, books, home decor, and sometimes as completely unnecessary items, just to hear the doorbell ring and see him standing there. I kept telling myself, these feelings were inappropriate. But my heart would race every single time that day as I was heading inside and saw Anthony delivering packages in the neighborhood. He passed by me on his motorbike. Suddenly his tire slipped, and he fell right in front of me. Anthony shouted, my heart pounding as I dropped my bag and ran toward him. His knee and elbow were scraped pretty badly, and pain was written all over his face. But somehow he still managed to flash that warm smile. Judith, I'm fine, it's nothing serious, he said, though his voice trembled slightly. Don't be ridiculous, and I said firmly, don't tell me you're fine. Come inside and let me take a look. I helped him pull his bike onto the curb and supported him as we walked to my house. He hesitated at first, but my insist left him no choice. Once we were inside, I guided him to the couch in my living room. I grabbed my first aid kit and started cleaning his wounds. My hands were trembling, but I tried to steady them so Anthony wouldn't notice as I worked. I couldn't help but notice how young and energetic he looked up close, but there was also a maturity in his expression that caught me off guard. I'm sorry for bothering you like this, Judith, he said, smiling, but really, it's not a big deal bothering me. I scoffed, trying to sound stern, but failing to hide my smile. You fall and hurt yourself, and you think I'm going to just leave you. Get a grip, Anthony, while applying the bandages. He noticed. He had gone quiet. His eyes were focused on me, and the air between us grew heavy as I placed the bandage on his arm. Our hands brushed for a brief moment. That accidental touch intensified. The silence between us, Judy began softly, his voice hesitant. I didn't expect you to be so kind. Most people just want me to drop off their packages and leave. I looked at him and something inside me shifted. Anthony, you're not just some delivery guy. I see the way you look at people, how thoughtful you are. And honestly, being around you makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in a long time. I admitted, my voice trembling slightly as my cheeks flushed. There was no taking the words back. Now, Anthony's expression changed. There was a newfound determination in his eyes, along with something undeniably magnetic. Slowly, he leaned closer, his gaze never leaving mine before this story spirals. Even more. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to hear what happens next. Your support through comments and likes means the world to me at that moment. Anthony's eyes locked onto mine, and the air between us became electric. This was only the beginning, do you know? He said after a brief silence, the place I'm staying at right now is so far from where I work, traveling back and forth every day. Exhausting. I've been thinking about finding somewhere closer, but the price are way too high. When he said that, something stirred in my chest. I realized I could help him. And the thought gave me a strange sense of excitement. Anthony, I said softly but decisively, I have a small apartment right next to my house. It's not rented out yet. If you want, you can move in for very reasonable price. It'll make things easier for you. Anthony looked at me surprised. Really, Judith? You don't have to be this kind, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. But I had already made up my mind. I knew from that moment on everything was about to change, and it did. That day became the first step in breaking the monotony of my life. This story was only just beginning in that moment. The tension between us grew even stronger while I was dressing his wounds. I held his arm, but my hand lingered on his skin a bit longer than necessary for a brief moment. My eyes wandered over his broad shoulders and strong arms. I noticed him looking at me too, carefully. His gaze traveled over my legs, my waist, and my shoulders, the fluttering. Inside me grew stronger, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. I was losing myself in that moment. My hands trembled as I finished the bandaging. Then, as I bent down to pick up a fallen bandage, Anthony bent down at the same time, and our hands accidentally touched again. We both froze. The electricity from that brief contact made the silence between us even heavier. When I slowly straightened up, our eyes locked once more. I tried to read the expression on his face. There was hesitation in his eyes, but also something undeniable. Appalachian attraction. Judith, he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. I have to say, I didn't expect you to be this kind. Most people just want me to drop their packages and leave. They wouldn't go out of their way for someone like me. Honestly, don't even think I deserve this much. Hearing those words made me lose myself for a moment looking at him. I saw something deep, something mature in this young man. I tried to gather myself, forcing a small laugh. Anthony, if you ever want to, you can. Move into the apartment. It's like I've been waiting for you to take it all along, I said, breaking the tension just a bit. Anthony looked even more surprised, really. Judith, to be honest, I need to move quickly. My landlord is trying to evict me. Plus, I need to finish my deliveries. He said, his voice sounding slightly rushed. He quickly stood up to leave, but paused to take my number before walking out the door. At that moment, the tension between us hit its peak as I worked on his wounds. My hand lingered on his skin, and our gazes met again and again, each time lingering a little longer. Something was building between us, undeniable and electric. I knew this was just the start of something I couldn't ignore. When I heard those words, I lost myself for a moment. As I looked at him, I saw a depth of maturity in this young man that caught me off guard. I tried to pull myself together, forcing a smile and letting out a soft laugh. Anthony, you're welcome to move into the apartment next to my house. Anytime. It's like I've been waiting for you to take it all along, I said, easing the tension just a bit. Anthony looked surprised, really. Judith, to be honest, I need to move quickly. My landlord is trying to kick me out and I still have to finish my delivery, he said, his voice slightly rushed. He quickly got up to leave, but not before taking my number. The next morning, I saw Anthony arriving in a large truck with two of his friends. They had started moving his belongings into the apartment, standing by my window. I found myself watching him carry those heavy boxes with his strong muscular arm. I couldn't look away. Something stirred inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Every movement he made seemed to draw my attention. His youthful energy, the vibrancy he carried, it was mesmerizing. After a while, I composed myself, poured some coffee into a thermos, and walked over to them. You all must be exhausted, I said. With a smile, I'd like to invite you for dinner. Let's all sit down and enjoy Anna's meal together. Anthony and his friends thanked me. But Anthony said, Judith, that's so kind of you, but my friends need to head back. It's a long way home for them. I felt a small pang of disappointment, but hid it well when evening came. Anthony showed up alone. Seeing him standing there, I felt a mix of surprise and excitement. I greeted him with a smile. Where are your friends? He shrugged, flashing me a small grin. They had to leave. They couldn't stay. But I didn't want to leave you alone tonight, he said. Hearing those words sent a warm rush through me. The rest of the evening over dinner, our conversation deepened. And in that moment I realized this was just the beginning of something new, to be honest, I said with a small smile, looking into Anthony's eyes. I was expecting all of you to come, but since it's just you. I guess there's no harm in opening a bottle of wine. I always enjoy wine with dinner. Anthony returned. The smile, his eyes locking on. Mine, that sounds perfect. Wine and your cooking. What more could I ask for? He said his words, igniting a little spark inside me. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses, and brought them to the table. As I opened the bottle, I tried not to notice the way Anthony's eyes were on me, studying me, as though he were trying to figure me out, but I could feel his gaze following my every move. Over dinner, with the help of a little wine, our conversation grew more personal. Loneliness, I said, taking a sip of wine. Sometimes it's almost unbearable. It can drive you crazy. I feel like I've spent most of my life living for others, and now I realize how much time I've wasted. Anthony listened intently, his expression soft and understanding. Loneliness is hard at any age, but you, Judith, your home, your cooking even. The way you dress, everything about you shows so much care and effort. You've kept yourself so beautiful. It feels unfair that someone like you has to live alone. Those words caught me off guard, warming something deep inside me. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to me like that. My heart raced as I looked into his eyes, realizing this connection we were building was something I hadn't felt in years. Those words both surprised and deeply moved me. No one had said anything like that to me in years. My heart started racing. I understand what you mean, I said softly, but sometimes no matter how hard you try. No one notices. Anthony set his wine glass down on the table and leaned toward me. I felt the intensity of his deep, focused gaze. You're wrong, he said, his voice low and resolute. It's impossible not to notice. Those words stirred something inside me, combined with the warmth of the alcohol my heart and mind were at. His eyes stayed fixed on me, in the way this young man looked at me with such attention ignited a thrill I hadn't felt in a long time. Anthony, you're very kind, said with a slight smile, though there was a tremor in my voice. I clasped my hands together in my lap, but I couldn't look away from his eyes in that moment. The space between us felt much smaller than it actually was. I need to be honest with you, he said, suddenly his voice deeper. When I came here, I was just looking for a fresh start. But the more I've talked to you, the more I've wanted to get to know you better. There's something different about you, Judith. It's like you to carry a light, something alive. His words left me stunned. The wine, the atmosphere, his gaze, everything hit me all at once. I took a deep breath, but my heart was pounding so fast it was impossible to calm down. Anthony, I said, locking my eyes with his, you've made this night so special. No one has made me feel this way in a long time. At the moment, the tension between us reached its peak when Anthony's eyes met. Mine, it was as if the world had stopped. Without thinking, caught in the magic of the moment, I leaned in toward him. When your lips met my heart, felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. His kiss awakened feelings in me that I'd been suppressing for years, but then reality hit me like a wave. I quickly pulled away, my face flushed with embarrassment, my thoughts swirling into chaos. This isn't right, I murmured, avoiding his gaze as I stumbled toward the kitchen, trying to escape the storm inside me. I hadn't realized Anthony had followed me until I felt his hands on my waist. His warmth, his closeness stopped me in my tracks. Judith, he said, his voice low but firm. He gently turned me around to face him, his eyes locking with mine before he kissed me again. This time, deeper, more intense. I couldn't breathe. There was no escaping this. My hands instinctively reached up to his shoulders as his strong arms held me tightly. I felt as though we were the only two people in the world. Anthony broke the kiss for a moment and looked into my eyes. Judith, do you really want This he whispered, the determination and warmth in his voice completely unraveled me. I nodded slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes. As his hand moved gently along my back, he guided me slowly upstairs to the bedroom. My heart was pounding wildly with every step. My anticipation grew once inside. The room, I sat on the edge of the bed, and Anthony stood in front of me. Pausing for a moment, his eyes roamed over me, and I could feel the heat of his gaze. I raised my hands to my shoulders, slowly sliding. The thin straps of my dress down the fabric glided, down my skin, and pulled right at my feet. The admiration and desire in Anthony's eyes only fueled the pull. I felt toward him. This moment was unlike anything I dared to imagine. In years, the only thing left to do was to surrender myself completely to the flow of the night before lying down on the bed. I caught a glimpse of my body in the mirror across the room. I looked mature and alluring at that moment. Anthony gently placed his hands on my shoulders, guiding me to lie down on the bed as he hovered above. His eyes locked onto mine, his hands resting on my waist, moving slowly. In that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in so long, something I had deeply missed. It didn't take long for me to respond, and I let out a sound that surprised even me. I couldn't figure out where to place my hands. It was as though I couldn't keep up with what I was feeling. Everything was so beautiful, and I had missed this so much. The emotions surging through me were overwhelming with the sheer intensity of it all. I closed my eyes, letting myself get lost in the moment. When I opened my eyes to look at Anthony, I saw him flushed and breathless. That sight excited me even more. I couldn't help but whisper, begging for it to happen again. Anthony, catching his breath, replied, "I want it more than you do." That day he made me feel happier than I'd been in years. He looked so at ease lying beside me, his breaths finally steadying. As I glanced down at the floor beside the bed, I saw the scattered clothes and smiled. I had missed this so much. Anthony's warm breath brushed against my neck. As we lay side by side, the silence between us was filled only by the sound of our breathing. After everything that had just happened, there was a peaceful stillness, yet I could still feel the lingering excitement ending within me. I turned to look at him. "Judith," Anthony said, his eyes meeting mine, "I want to get away with you to a beach town, just you and me." What do you think? That suggestion sent a wave of excitement through me, a kind of thrill I hadn't felt in so long. A vacation? That sounds amazing, I replied with a smile. "But I'm sure this won't just be any ordinary trip," I added, watching the sparkle in his eyes. Anthony chuckled softly, reaching out to gently brush my hair back from my face. "No, Judith, this is just the beginning," he said. In that moment, we both understood that this vacation wouldn't just be an escape. It would be the start of something new, something that would strengthen the bond between us. This story doesn't end here. What happens during that vacation? And so much more is yet to come. Stay tuned. If you've made it this far, I know my story has touched you deeply. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss a thing. Don't forget to hit the follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about what you think of this story. Love you all.